the reason behind its own pale and lean appearance, the Brahmana, reflecting on the question, for a brief moment began to offer his thoughts. "You are pale and lean," he said, "because you dwell in a place far from your abode, moving in unfamiliar territory, and deprived of the company of friends and kinsmen. You enjoyed vast affluence. Yet it is not reciprocated with respect and praise." The Brahmana continued to speak his words, dripping with wisdom and compassion. He explained that the Rakshasa's pale appearance was a result of its own merits, being overlooked by others who instead honored those lacking in virtue and knowledge. The Brahmana highlighted how the Rakshasa's high-mindedness led it to disregard available means of sustenance, and how it had been deceived by another's superior intelligences. The Brahmana spoke. He touched upon various aspects of the Rakshasa's life, from its grief over those suffering in this world to its ridicule by others who lacked wisdom. He pointed out that the Rakshasa was well versed in the ways of the world and had a deep understanding of mysteries, yet it remained unappreciated. The Brahmana's words painted a picture of the Rakshasa's life as one of sorrow and longing despite its own merits. The Rakshasa felt overlooked and undervalued by others. The Brahmana's speech was like a balm to the Rakshasa's soul, soothing its pain and lifting its spirits. Moved by the Brahmana's words, the Rakshasa's demeanor changed. It began to see itself in a new light as one who had been misunderstood and overlooked. With gratitude, the Rakshasa worshipped the Brahmana, making him a friend and bestowing wealth upon him. The Rakshasa released the Brahmana from its clutches, setting him free without devouring him. As the Brahmana walked away, he was filled with a sense of satisfaction, knowing that his words had brought solace to the troubled Rakshasa. The encounter between the two beings served as a testament to the power of conciliation and compassion, demonstrating how even the most unlikely of friendships can be forged through understanding and empathy. In the court of King Yudhishthira, a renowned monarch and one of the Pandavas, a grand sage named Vaisapena began to narrate ancient mysteries and sacred knowledge. The king had asked his grandsire, Bhishma, to explain the ways of righteousness, and duty as well as the best gifts to give under various circumstances. Bhishma, with reverence and humility, spoke to the king about the sacred duties that were beyond even the god's understanding. He explained how Yama, the god of death, had acquired this knowledge through his own penances and yoga meditation. Bhishma described how certain individuals, like oilmen, drinkers, courtesans, and territorial chiefs, could be considered equal to one another in their merits. However, a great king was said to be equivalent to half of these combined individuals. Therefore, it was not advisable for kings or those who sought righteousness to accept gifts from such people. Instead, they should focus on the sacred sins that comprised three essential aspects: religion, wealth, and pleasure. Among these, wealth and pleasure were naturally attractive, but one should concentrate on listening to the expositions of religion, as it held immense benefits. Bhishma continued his explanation by describing the significance of the Sraddha, a ritual performed in honor of one's ancestors. He told the king that those who listened to scriptures about these topics and practiced them would be considered holy and sinless, like the mighty Narayana himself. The merits acquired through gifts of kind, ablutions in sacred waters, and sacrifices were all surpassed by the act of treating guests with reverence. As Bhishma finished his explanation, a celestial messenger appeared at the court of Indra, but remained invisible. He asked why sexual congress was forbidden for those who performed sraddhas or ate during them, as well as the significance of offering 3 rice balls separately in these rituals. The Pitras, seated towards the east, applauded the messenger's question and began to explain the mysteries surrounding the sraddha. They told him that if a man indulged in sexual congress on the day he performed a sraddha or ate during it, his Pitras would have to lie in wait for a whole month to collect their share of victuals. Seed regarding the rice balls offered at the sraddha, they explained that the first ball should be considered thrown into the waters, the second given to one of the wives to eat, and the third cast into the blazing fire. This ordinance was followed by the gods themselves, and those who adhered to it would please their Pitras and ensure their progeny's prosperity. The celestial messenger asked further questions about the rice balls, inquiring how they reached their respective destinations and what ends they achieved when disposed of in such a manner. The Pitras replied that only Markandeya, an immortal Brahmana devoted to the Pitras, was aware of these. In the sacred halls of ancient wisdom, Vishnu, a revered sage, stood before his audience recounting the timeless words of Vishnu, the benevolent Lord Indra. The mighty king of the gods had posed a question to Vishnu, seeking to understand what acts would bring him joy and satisfaction. Vishnu's response was like a gentle breeze on a summer day, soothing and enlightening. That which I greatly hate, he said, is the detraction of Brahmanas. Without doubt, if the Brahmanas are worshipped, I regard myself worshipped. He emphasized that superior Brahmanas should be saluted with reverence and fed with hospitality. Their feet revered in the evening as Vishnu spoke his words with a tapestry of devotion and reverence. I am gratified with men who act in this way, he said, as also with those who worship and make offerings to the world. There is no Sibula on Kaudam. He revealed that beholding a Brahmana, even if small in stature or bearing mud from the bank, would bring liberation from all sins. Those who worshipped the Aswata tree Gorakana and the sacred cow were said to be worshipping the entire universe, including the gods, demons, and humans. Ever curious, asked Vishnu why he praised these symbols of reverence. Vishnu smiled, his eyes twinkling with ancient wisdom. It was with my circular disk that the deities were slain, he said. It was with my 2 feet that the world was covered, assuming the form of a boar. I slew Hiranyaksha as a dwarf. I conquered King Valai. Those who worshipped in these forms would never meet discomfiture. As Bhishma continued his tale, Vishnu's words took on a deeper meaning. He revealed that those who offered hospitality to a Brahmana, leading the Brahmacharya mode of life, and ate what remained after feeding him, were regarded as eating Amrita, the elixir of immortality. Those who stood facing the sun in the morning twilight reaped the merit of performing ablutions in all sacred rivers. Baladeva, a revered sage, spoke up, next sharing another mystery of devotion. Ignorant persons, unacquainted with this truth, meet with much distress at the hands of other creatures. He said, rising early, touching a cow, bee curds, mustard, seeds, and praying one, became cleansed of all sins. The deities themselves spoke up, sharing the importance of using a vessel of copper and making offerings to them by observing fasts or vows in any other way. They said men of little understanding gained nothing. The use of a copper vessel was essential for presenting offerings, giving and accepting alms, offering arghya, and pouring oblations of water mixed with. In the sacred tradition of ancient India, there existed a profound understanding of the intricate relationships between humans and the divine forces that govern their lives. Vidavasu, also known as Surya, the radiant sun god, revealed to his followers the importance of making offerings to the celestial bodies on the day of the full moon. Vidavasu instructed his devotees to stand facing the brilliant orb and present 2 offerings, a palmful of water and ekshada, a mixture of rice grains with ghee. By doing so, they would be adoring their sacred fire, which was believed to be a manifestation of the 3 principal fires, Agni, Vayu, and Aditya. Vivavasu warned that those who failed to make these offerings on the day of the full moon would incur the sin of Brahmanicide, even if they had not cut down a large tree. The consequences of neglecting these rituals were dire. A person who committed such an offense would be shunned by his pitras or ancestral spirits, and his family line would eventually become extinct. The deities themselves would reject the libations poured upon them on days when such transgressions occurred. Sri, a revered sage, added to Vivavasu's teachings by revealing that households where just reigned, with eating and drinking vessels scattered about, women beaten, and sacred objects desecrated, were unworthy of divine blessings. The deities and pitras were abandoned such places, leaving the inhabitants to suffer the consequences of their own misdeeds. Sainurus, a wise and compassionate sage, shared another secret, that the offspring of those who stood under the Karanjak tree for an entire year with a lamp burning brightly, holding the roots of the Suvarkala plant in hand, would be blessed with prosperity. This ritual was believed to have the power to bring good fortune and ensure the continuation of one's lineage. Gargya, another revered sage, emphasized the importance of treating guests with dignity and respect. He advised that lamps should be lit in honor of their visitors, and that one should abstain from all kinds of flesh or food during their stay. Injuring kine or brahmanas was considered a grave offense, and Gargya cautioned against such actions. Furthermore, Gargya revealed that the deities did not accept libations on certain occasions. If they witnessed women in their impure state, or those born to mothers afflicted with leprosy, the pitras of such individuals would remain displeased for 13 years. To avoid this fate, one should invite brahmanas and cause them to utter blessings when performing Sraddhas Kamya.
A sage known for his wisdom and insight warned against the presence of inauspicious objects within the home, broken utensils, bedsteads, cocks, dogs, and trees grown within dwelling houses were all believed to be harbors of evil spirits. He cautioned.
In a serene and tranquil atmosphere of Vayu, the gentle breeze began to share with the gathering of sages a profound truth about the duties that bring happiness to humanity. With a warm smile, he invited them to listen attentively as he revealed certain transgressions and their underlying causes. As the sun cast its warm rays upon the assembly, Vayu's words carried on the gentle breeze. My friends, he said, there is one who offers sesame seeds and water to his ancestors for 4 months during the rainy season. He also provides food to a learned Brahmana, pours libations into the sacred fire, and makes offerings of rice cooked in sugared milk. Furthermore, he lights lamps in honor of his pitras with sesame seeds and water. He who performs these actions with faith and concentration acquires the merits of 100 sacrifices, where animals are offered to the deities. The sages listened intently, their eyes closed in contemplation, as Vayu's words carried them on a journey of spiritual growth. They envisioned the man who performed these duties, his heart filled with devotion and his actions guided by faith. As they opened their eyes, they saw the radiance on Vayu's face, a reflection of the joy that comes from living a life of righteousness. However, Vayu's gentle tone turned somber as he revealed another mystery. Unknown to many, there is one who thinks it acceptable for a Sudra to ignite the fire or libations, or who does not see any fault when women incompetent in assisting at sraddhas and other rites are allowed to participate. He said the sages' eyes widened in understanding as they grasped the gravity of such actions, which stained the person with sinus. Vayu spoke. A sense of unease settled over the assembly. They saw how the 3 sacrificial fires became enraged with such a person, and how in their next life he would be born as a Sudra. His ancestors and deities would never be gratified with him, and he would suffer the consequences of his actions. Vayu's words were like a gentle rain that brought clarity to the sages' minds. They realized that by performing certain expiatory acts one could cleanse oneself from such sins. With a deep sense of reverence, they listened as Vayu described the rituals that would bring happiness and freedom from suffering. For 3 days one should fast, while pouring libations onto the sacred fire with the urine of a cow mixed with cowden milk. And Vayu's recitation came to an end. The sages felt a sense of peace settle over them. They understood that by abstaining from these transgressions, or by undergoing the expiatory rites indicated, they could attain heaven. When they left this world with hearts filled with devotion and minds illuminated by Vayu's words, they returned to their daily lives ready. The sun was setting over the land, casting a warm orange glow over the gathering of seekers of truth. Lomasa, a wise and venerable sage, stood before them, his eyes shining with a deep understanding. He began to speak, his voice like a gentle breeze on a summer day. My friends, he said, the pitras of those men who indulge in the wives of others without their consent are filled with disappointment. When the time for sraddhas comes, they become disillusioned and disconnected from the cycle of life and death. Lomasa's words hung in the air like a challenge, as if daring his listeners to reflect on their own actions. As he spoke, the minds of his audience began to wander back to their own lives. Some thought of times when they had strayed from the path of righteousness, while others considered the consequences of their desires. Lomasa's words were like a mirror reflecting the depths of their own souls. But it is not just those who indulge in the wives of others, he continued, those who engage in sexual union with barren women or appropriate what belongs to a Brahmana are equally sinful. The pictures of such people cut them off without desiring to have any intercourse with them. Lomasa's voice was like a warning bell tolling for those who had wandered from the path. The seekers of truth listened intently as Lomasa spoke of the offerings that failed to gratify the deities and the pitras. He told of the man who desires his own good, but cannot achieve it through selfish actions. His words were like a river flowing steadily, carrying his listeners along with him on a journey of self-discovery. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Lomasa spoke of another mystery unknown to all with regard to religion. One should always do the bidding of one's preceptor and other seniors. He said, his voice filled with conviction. On the 12th
lunar day, as also on the day of the full moon, every month one should make gifts unto Brahmanas of ghee, and the offerings that constitute a chat. The minds of his listeners were filled with wonder as Lomasa spoke of the measure of merit acquired by such an act by making such gifts. He said, a person becomes endued with great energy and prowess. The divine Sama, well pleased with him, grants him the fruition of his wishes. His words were like a promise, a guarantee that those who followed this path would be rewarded as the night deep. And Lomasa spoke of another duty, together with its foundation, that was productive of great merit in this age of Kali. He said that duty, if performed, brings about much happiness to man. He told of the man who rises at early dawn and purifies himself by a bath, attires himself in white robes. In the realm of the gods and Pitras, a gathering of esteemed sages and deities had assembled to seek the counsel of Arundhati, the wife of Vasishtha. Her reputation as a paragon of ascetic merit, and one who embodied the virtues of her illustrious husband, was renowned throughout the land. As the assembly focused their attention on Arundhati, they asked her to share her wisdom on the mysteries of duty and religion with humility and gratitude. She accepted their request, saying that her understanding of these high matters was due in part to their consideration for her own spiritual pursuits. Arundhati began by explaining that the knowledge of eternal duties and their corresponding merits should only be imparted to those who possessed faith or a pure heart. She cautioned against sharing this wisdom with individuals who were bereft of faith, consumed by pride, guilty of Brahmanicide, or had committed other heinous acts. With reverence and respect for Arundhati then revealed a secret ritual that was said to bring immense happiness to mankind according to her teachings. If one were to wash the horns of a cow with water and blades of kusa grass at dawn, and allow the water to drip down upon their own head, they would be considered to have performed ablutions in all the sacred waters of the three worlds. The assembly was deeply moved by Arundhati's words, and all present applauded her wisdom. The blessings of Brahman and Yama were bestowed upon her, with Brahman granting her the boon that her penances would continually increase. Yama, too, praised her discourse, saying that it was excellent and worthy of being heard by great rishis and men of faith. As the assembly continued to discuss the merits of various duties, Chitragupta's voice was heard, sharing his wisdom on the importance of performing acts of kindness towards others. He emphasized the value of giving water for drink, lamps for lighting darkness, sandals, umbrellas, and kapila, cows with due rites in particular. He stressed that a gift of a kapila, cow to a Brahmana, conversant with the Vedas and Pushkara, was capable of cleansing even the most grave sins. The assembly was deeply moved by Chitragupta's words, and Surya himself was so inspired that his hairs stood on end with great splendor. He addressed to all present, saying that those who made these gifts unto high-souled Brahmanas would become freed from fear of every kind. He also warned against speaking to or associating with individuals who were stained by vicious deeds, as they should be avoided at all costs. In the end, it was clear that Arundhati's wisdom and Chitragupta's teachings had brought great joy and enlightenment to the assembly. The gods and Pitras departed with a renewed sense of purpose, inspired to perform acts of kindness and compassion towards others, and to avoid those who were consumed by. The sun had just begun to set on the vast expanse of the forest, casting a warm orange glow over the assembly gathered before Bhishma. The venerable sage sat cross-legged on the ground, his eyes closed in contemplation, as he addressed the Pramathas. Those mysterious wanderers of the night, why do you afflict those men who are vile and impure? Bhishma asked, his voice carrying a cross, but clearing like a gentle breeze rustling through leaves. The Pramathas, invisible to mortal eyes, seemed to stir in response, their presence palpable, but unseen. The deities, Pitras, and Rishis, all highly blessed beings, spoke up in unison, their voices echoing Bhishma's question. You are all highly blessed wanderers, they said. Why do you afflict those men who are vile and impure? What acts are regarded as impediments to your power? The Pramathas, it seemed, were not just mindless spirits, but beings with a purpose and a set of rules that governed their actions. The Pramathas began to speak, their voices like the rustling of dried leaves. Men are rendered unclean by acts of sexual congress, they said. Those who do not purify themselves after such acts, those who insult their superiors, those who eat different kinds of meat in a state of stupefaction,
These men are regarded as unclean. The Brahmanas listed the various acts that made humans vulnerable to their attacks: sleeping at the foot of a tree, keeping animal matter under one's pillow, or lying down with one's head where one's feet should bear. The Brahmanas' words dripped with a sense of disdain and disgust. Verily, these men have many holes, they said, using an odd phrase to describe human frailty. Those who throw their phlegm and other unclean secretions into the water, without doubt, these men deserve to be slain and eaten up by us. The Brahmanas' purpose was clear: to afflict those humans who lived in darkness and ignorance. But the Brahmanas also spoke of acts that could ward off their attacks: those men upon whose persons accursed streaks of Gorakana, or who hold vakas in their hands, or who make gifts of ghee with those ingredients that go by the name of Akshata. These men are incapable of being afflicted by us. The Brahmanas listed various objects and practices that could protect humans from their wrath: keeping a sacred fire burning day and night, possessing the skin or teeth of a wolf or a hill tortoise, or having a cat or goat with a specific color. The Brahmanas' words hung in the air like a challenge. Bhishma's eyes snapped open, and he addressed the assembly once more. We have thus told you everything.
In the ancient days, Bhishma, a revered sage, stood before the assembled deities. He spoke with an air of authority. After this, the grandsire Brahman emerged from the primeval lotus, radiating the sweet fragrance and gentle charm of the flower. The grandsire's words were like a gentle breeze on a summer day, soothing and calming to the senses. With the deities listening intently, Bhishma continued. He addressed us with Vasava, the lord of Sakya, at their head. Behold, mighty Naga Renuk resides in the nether regions. His strength and prowess unmatched. His name is synonymous with great power. Vishnu's words painted a vivid picture of this magnificent being who is tasked by the deities to seek knowledge from the mighty elephants that uphold the earth. The grandsire's words hung in the air like a challenge, and Renuk, the elephant, felt an inner stirring. He set off towards the 8 elephants, standing guard in the 8 quarters of the world. As he approached them, he bowed his head in reverence and began to speak. Noble creatures, I have been commanded by the deities and our ancestors to seek your wisdom on the mysteries of duty and religion. The air was filled with anticipation as Renuk requested their discourse. 8 elephants, each one a towering jinn, spoke in unison. Their voices boomed like thunder, yet their words were gentle and soothing. On the 8th day of the dark fortnight in the month of Kartika, when the constellation Aslaja is ascendant, make offerings of treacle and rice to the Sraddha ceremony. They instructed Renuk on the rituals that would bring them joy and alleviate their burden. As they spoke, the elephants revealed a secret. When the Maker of Day retires to his chambers in the west, offer valai upon an anthill sanded with Gajendra flowers and accompanied by blue clothes and fragrant ornaments. Their words painted a vivid picture of the ritual, which would not only bring them joy, but also grant merit to those who performed it. The elephant's discourse was like a river flowing gently through the landscape. Renuk listened intently, his heart filled with wonder and reverence. He realized that these mighty beings were not just upholders of the earth, but also teachers guiding humanity towards the path of righteousness. As Renuk returned to the deities, he shared the wisdom imparted by the elephants. The grandsire's words still echoed in their minds, but now they had a deeper understanding of the rituals and practices that would bring them closer to the divine deities. Pitras and revered rishis listened with rapt attention as Renuk recounted his encounter with the elephants. They applauded him warmly, acknowledging his diligence and dedication to seeking knowledge. In that, in the midst of a gathering, Mahaswara stood before his devotees, his eyes shining with an inner light. My children, he began, you have all spoken eloquently about your duties and virtues. But now listen closely as I reveal to you some secrets of faith and devotion. As he spoke, the air seemed to vibrate with anticipation. Mahaswara's words were like a gentle breeze that rustled the leaves of their understanding, awakening them to new truths. Those who have cultivated a heart free from anxiety, he said, and who possess unwavering faith shall be instructed in the mysteries of duty and devotion. His gaze swept across the assembly as if searching for those whose hearts were pure and receptive. I speak now of one who for a month gives food to kine every day, contenting himself with only one meal each day. Mahaswara's voice took on a tone of reverence, as if he were speaking of a sacred ritual. The devotees leaned, in their faces aglow with curiosity. These creatures, Mahaswara continued, are blessed beyond measure. They are the very embodiment of the sacred, upholding not only the deities and human beings, but also the Asuras, those who dwell in darkness. To serve them is to tap into a wellspring of merit, one that bears grave consequences. A hush fell over the assembly as Mahaswara's words conjured images of kine roaming free, their gentle lowing echoing through the ages. In days of old, he said, his voice waving a tail, I had declared my approval of these noble creatures, and when Brahman, born from the primeval lotus, beseeched me to show kindness towards them, I granted his wish as Mahaswara spoke. A figure emerged in his mind's eye, a majestic bull standing proudly on its hind legs, its horns gleaming with an otherworldly light. This symbol, he said, pointing upwards, has stood as the device on my standard overhead. Since that day I have always cherished kind, and so should you. All the devotees listened entranced as Mahaswara's words painted a vivid picture of kine as powerful givers of boons. Those who worship them, he said, his voice filled with conviction, shall receive their rewards in full, even for one day's act of kindness. The kind shall grant a fourth part of the merits won through a lifetime of good deeds. As Mahaswara finished speaking, the assembly remained silent, absorbed in contemplation. The air was heavy with the weight of his words, and the devotees knew that their understanding had been forever altered by this revelation.
In a sacred gathering, the wise Skanda stood before his companions and began to reveal a profound duty, one that would bring great merit to those who followed it. With a gentle, yet firm tone, he said, Listen carefully, my friends, for I shall impart a secret known only to me. If you take a small amount of earth from the horns of a majestic blue bull and smear your body with it for 3 days, then perform your ablutions, you will wash away all stains and evil deeds. You will attain sovereignty in this life and be celebrated for your heroism. In every birth the Skanda spoke, his words carried weight and significance. His companions listened intently, their minds open to the wisdom he shared. He continued, but there is more. If you take a copper vessel and mix cooked food with honey, then offer it as valet to the rising full moon on its evening, the Sadhis, Rudras, Adityas, Visuddhivas, Twinaswins, Maruts, and Vasas will accept that offering. By doing so, Sama will increase, and so will the Vastasene. Vishu, a revered deity, stepped forward to share his own wisdom. My friends, he said, the person who listens with faith and an open heart to the mysteries of religion and duty is revealed by the high-soul deities, and the wise rishis will never succumb to evil. They will be freed from all fear and become a vessel for the divine. If you read these sections that describe auspicious duties along with their secrets, you will acquire all the merits of those who have performed them. As Vishnu spoke, his words filled the air with an otherworldly energy. His companions felt their minds expand as if the very fabric of reality was unfolding before them. Reading or reciting these mysteries, Vishnu continued, or hearing them recited by others, will bring abundant merits. The deities and pitras will rejoice at the havya and kavya offered by such a person. These offerings become inexhaustible like the virtues of the offerer. Bhishma, a revered sage, stood up to conclude the teachings. My dear king, he said, these mysteries of religion and duty have been revealed to me by Vesa, and now passed on to you. One who is conversant with these sacred truths knows that this knowledge surpasses all riches and wealth. This wisdom should not be imparted to one lacking faith, or to an atheist, nor to one who has abandoned their duties or fallen away from compassion. As Bhishma finished speaking, the gathering fell silent, as if holding its collective breath in reverence for the profound teachings shared by Skanda, Vishnu, and Bhishma. The air was filled with an atmosphere of devotion, as if the very presence of the divine had descended upon them.
In a quiet moment, surrounded by the gentle rustle of leaves, Yudhishthira sat with Bhishma, seeking guidance on the intricacies of accepting food from others. Who are those persons, O Bharata? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. From whom a Brahmana in this world may accept his food, from whom may a Kshatriya, a Vaisya, and a Sudra take their food respectively. Bhishma's eyes seemed to gaze into the distance as he began to speak. A Brahmana may take his food from another Brahmana, or a Kshatriya, or a Vaisya, he said, but he must never accept food from a Sudra, for when a Brahmana takes food from one who has not dedicated himself to the pursuit of knowledge and spiritual growth, it is as if he consumes the very abomination of the earth. Yudhishthira's eyes widened in understanding as Bhishma continued. A Kshatriya may take his food from a Brahmana, a Kshatriya, or a Vaisya, he explained, but he must eschew food given by Siddhas who are addicted to evil ways and who partake of all manner of food without any scruple. Bhishma's words carried the weight of experience, for he had lived through many battles and seen the consequences of actions. Bhishma's gaze turned inward as he spoke of the importance of a Vaisya's duty. A Vaisya lives by distributing the fruits of his own acts and agriculture. He said, the breeding of kine and trade are the legitimate work in which a Vaisya may engage without fear of censure. Yet Bhishma warned if one abandons their own occupation to take up that of another caste, they should be considered as belonging to that very castes. The sun began to set, casting long shadows across the landscape. Bhishma listed those who were considered Siddhas, professors of the healing art, mercenary soldiers, the priest who acts as warder of the house he recited, and persons who devote a whole year to study without any profit are all to be considered as Siddhas. Yudhishthira listened intently, his mind absorbing the wisdom being imparted. The air grew cooler as Bhishma spoke of those who partook in forbidden food. Those who impudently partake of food offered at ceremonials in a Siddha's house are afflicted with a terrible calamity. He said, in consequence of partaking such forbidden food, they lose their family, strength, and energy, and attain to the status of animals, descending to the position of dogs, fallen in virtue and devoid of all religious observances. As the stars began to twinkle in the night sky, Vishwa's words. The sun had just begun to rise over the kingdom, casting a warm glow over the bustling streets. Yudhishthira, the wise and just king, sat in contemplative silence, his mind consumed by a pressing question. He turned to Bhishma, the revered elder statesman, seeking guidance on a matter that weighed heavily on his heart. He said, using the Sanskrit word for non-violence has taught us that certain foods are acceptable while others should be shunned. But I am troubled by one aspect of this teaching. What happens when a Brahmana accepts food from another, especially if it is offered in honor of the gods or as an oblation to the men? Vishma's eyes sparkled with wisdom as he began to explain the intricacies of purification for the Brahmanas. When accepting clarified butter, he said, the expiation is made by pouring oblations on the fire and reciting the Savitri hymn. Sesame requires the same purification, while meat, honey, salt, or gold demand a different approach. As Bhishma spoke his words with a tapestry of intricate rituals and ceremonies designed to purify the Brahmanas from the sin of accepting tainted food for gold, he continued, a Brahmana becomes cleansed by silently reciting the Gayatri prayer and holding a piece of iron in hand visible to all. Yudhishthira listened intently, his mind absorbing the nuances of each ritual. Bhishma's words painted vivid pictures of the various expiations required for different foods. Bathing thrice daily for 12 days after partaking of food at a dead person's house, performing ablutions and reciting the Savitri hymn to purify oneself from impurity, or living on alms for 3 successive nights. When eating with Vaisyas as the sun climbed higher in the sky, Bhishma's teachings turned to the consequences of eating with those of lower castes. When a Brahmana eats with a Siddha, he cautioned the Siddha loses family respectability. When a Vaisya eats with another Vaisya, they lose cattle and friends. The Kshatriya loses prosperity, and the Brahmana his splendor and energy. Yudhishthira's eyes widened as he grasped the gravity of these consequences. He knew that Bhishma spoke not from dogmatic tradition, but from a deep understanding of the interconnectedness of all things. As the day wore on, Bhishma concluded his teachings with a stern warning. In such cases, expiations must be made and propitiatory rites observed to destroy the sin. The wise elder's words hung in the air like a gentle breeze rustling leaves, reminding Yudhishthira of the delicate balance between purity and impurity. As the sun began its descent into the sun had set over the kingdom, casting a warm orange glow over the assembly gathered around Yudhishthira. The young prince, still reeling from the weight of his responsibilities as king, sought guidance on the path to true greatness. He turned to Bhishma, the venerable patriarch, who had walked among gods and mortals like Mahabharat. Yudhishthira said, his voice filled with a sense of longing, I have always been torn between 2 ideals, charity and devotion. Which one is more revered in this world? Tell me, O sire, that I may know the truth. Bhishma's eyes twinkled as he began to speak, his words dripping with the wisdom of ages. Let me tell you, Yudhishthira, of those who have walked the path of virtue and righteousness. They are the ones who have cleansed their hearts through penance and practiced acts of piety. Their devotion has taken them to realms beyond our mortal comprehension. As Bhishma spoke, his voice wove a tapestry of stories, each one more breathtaking than the last. He spoke of Aittreya Rishi, who had imparted the knowledge of the Supreme Being to his pupils and was thus transported to the celestial regions of King Sivai, who had given up his own son for the benefit of a Brahmana, earning himself a place in heaven. Bhishma's words painted vivid pictures of these ancient heroes. Rantidava, who had made gifts to Vasishtha, Devavrita, who had donated a golden umbrella, and Varisha, who had given up his entire kingdom. Each one story was a testament to the transformative power of charity and devotionist. The night war on Bhishma continued to recount tales of those who had walked the path of righteousness. There was King Janamejaya, who had made gifts of precious items to Brahmanas, Vrishadarbai, who had given jewels and houses to the wise man Nimai, who had donated his daughter and kingdom to Agastya. Stories seemed to flow from Bhishma like a river, each one connecting with the last, forming an unbroken chain of virtue and devotion. Yudhishthira listened entranced as the patriarch spoke of Rama, Vasishtha, Ketchesna, Maruta, Brahmadatta, Mitrisa, Satyama, Saharakita, Satyama, Sumayudutamat, Medaraswa, Lomapada, Agjaratha, each one a shining example of the rewards that awaited those who walked the path of charity and devotionist. The night deepened. Yudhishthira's mind was filled with wonder and awe. He saw before him a world where virtue was rewarded, where righteousness led to realms beyond his wall.
The sun was setting over the kingdom, casting a warm orange glow over the assembly gathered around Yudhishthira, the eldest son of Pandu. He sat with an air of curiosity and respect, his eyes fixed intently on Bhishma, the wise and venerable patriarch who had been a mentor to him. Since childhood, O sire, Yudhishthira, began his voice filled with reverence, I have heard from you the names of those kings who have ascended to heaven. You possess great power in observing the vow of truth by following the religion of gift. I wish to know more about this. His words hung in the air like a question waiting for an answer. Bhishma's eyes twinkled with understanding as he nodded his head. Listen, O son of Kunti, he said, his voice gentle but firm. I shall tell you in detail about the subject of gifts. There are 5 kinds of gifts, and I shall explain each one to you. He took a deep breath, collecting his thoughts before continuing. The first kind of gift is made from desire of merit. Bhishma began, this is when one gives to the Brahmanas, those who have dedicated their lives to studying and teaching the sacred scriptures. By doing so, one acquires fame in this world and great felicity in the next. He paused, serving the assembly before him. But gifts can also be made from desire of profit. He continued, this is when one gives to someone because they have asked for it, perhaps with promises of reward or favor, or sometimes people give out of habit simply because it has become a part of their nature. Bhishma's eyes seemed to cloud over slightly as he spoke, as if recalling past experience. Says, then there are gifts made from fear, he said, his voice taking on a more serious tone. This is when one gives to someone who might otherwise cause harm or trouble. Even a wise and learned person may make such gifts out of self-preservation, but the most noble kind of gift is made from free choice. Bhishma declared, his eyes shining with enthusiasm. This is when one gives to someone dear to them without expectation of reward or favor. It is a gesture of love and affection, a way of showing that one values the other person's well-being. And finally, there are gifts made from pity. He concluded, this is when one gives to someone who is poor and in need, moved by compassion and kindness. Such gifts bring joy not only to the receiver, but also to the giver themselves. As Bhishma finished speaking, a sense of stillness fell over the assembly. Yudhishthira's eyes were wide with understanding, his face reflecting the depth of his gratitude for the wisdom imparted to him. The patriarch's words had been like a gentle rain, nourishing and refreshing.
In the midst of great distress, King Yudhishthira turned to his revered grandfather Bhishma, seeking guidance and wisdom. The king's words were filled with reverence and longing. O grandsire, you are possessed of great wisdom. You are fully conversant with every branch of learning. I desire to hear from you discourses that are interwoven with religion and profit, that lead to felicity hereafter, and that are fraught with wonder unto all creatures. Bhishma's eyes lit up with joy as he listened to the king's words. He was filled with affection for Yudhishthira and his brothers, and he knew that it was time to share a sacred tale. I shall certainly recite to you discourses that are delightful, Bhishma said, on the subject of the presence of this Vishu as displayed in days of yore, and as I have heard from my preceptors. Bhishma began to narrate the story of Krishna, who had observed a vow extending for 10 and 2 years. The righteous old one had gone through the rite of initiation, and his penance was so intense that it was said to be worthy of the gods themselves, as Krishna sat on his mounting throne surrounded by his disciples and the great rishis Narada, Parva, Dhamya, Devala, Kesipa, Hasikasipa, and many others. The fire emerged from his mouth. The fire was like nothing anyone had ever seen before. It consumed everything in its path, including mountains, trees, birds, beasts, and even the creatures that lived on them. The mountain summit became desolate, devoid of all life. But Krishna, with a gentle look, brought the mountain back to its former state. Flowers bloomed once more, birds sang sweet melodies, and animals roamed freely. The rishis were amazed by this spectacle. They had never seen anything like it before. Their hairs stood on end, their vision blurred with tears, as they beheld the wonder of Krishna's power. Narayana, the destroyer of Madhu, addressed them. Why has wonder filled your hearts? It is I who create all worlds and destroy them again. I am winter, summer, and the season of rains of all creatures, mobile and immobile. I am the father, mother, master, and origin. The rishis explained their doubt to Narayana. We have witnessed the fire issuing from your mouth, consuming everything in its path. We are filled with wonder and doubt, O source of all auspiciousness. It behooves thee to resolve this doubt for us. Vasudeva, the father of Krishna, intervened, sharing his own story of observing vows and penance. She explained that the fire that had emerged from his mouth was indeed the energy of Vishu, a manifestation of in the majestic mountains of Himavat, where the Siddhas and Charanas dwelled. A grand spectacle unfolded. The righteous lord of all deities, Mahadeva, also known as Shiva, sat in meditation, surrounded by hundreds of ghostly beings who presented diverse aspects to the eye of the beholder. Some had faces like lions, tigers, or elephants, while others resembled jackals, pards, or apes. The air was filled with the sweet scent of celestial flowers and incense, and the sounds of celestial instruments echoed through the valleys. The great rishis, including the Siddhas, who had drawn in their vital seed the Maruts, Basasantas, Visudevas, and each has all dwelled on that mountain with minds concentrated in Yugas. Mahadeva sat on one of the peaks adorned with excellent minerals. His sacred thread consisted of a snake. His arms were decked with red agnadus, and his bird was green. He had matted locks on his head, and his terrible features inspired fear in the hearts of all enemies of the god. Suddenly Mahadeva's spouse, Yuva, daughter of Himavat, approached him, surrounded by the wives of the ghostly beings who were the companions of the great deity. Her attire was like that of her lord, and she held a jar filled with the waters of every tirtha. As she drew near, she rained flowers on every side and scattered divers kinds of sweet perfumes. With smelling lips and desirous of playing a jestuma, covered Mahadeva's eyes from behind, using her 2 beautiful hands. As soon as his eyes were thus closed, all the regions became dark, and life seemed to be extinct. Everywhere in the universe the Homa rites ceased, and the universe became suddenly deprived of the sacred Vasha. The living creatures became cheerless and filled with fear, for when Mahadeva's eyes were closed, the universe seemed to become sunless. But soon a mighty and blazing flame of fire emanated from Mahadeva's forehead, and a third eye resembling another sun appeared on it. That eye blazed forth like the ute of fire and began to consume the mountain. The large-eyed daughter of Himavat, beholding what occurred, bowed her head unto Mahadeva. Endued with that third eye, which resembled a blazing fire, she stood there with gaze fixed on her lord. As the mountain forests burned on every side, with there was and other trees of straight trunks, and their delightful sandals, and divers excellent medicinal herbs, herd after herd of deer and other animals, filled with fright, came to the place where Hera sat and sought his protection. With those creatures almost filling it, the retreat of the great deity blazed forth with a peculiar beauty. Meanwhile that fire, swelling wildly, soared up to the very heavens and end.
In the realm of the divine, a sacred conversation unfolded between Lord Maheswara, the mighty god with 4 faces, and Yuva, the goddess of beauty and compassion. The same was set in the crematorium, a place of reverence for the god, where he would often wander in search of spiritual solace. As Yuva approached Maheswara, she couldn't help but notice his majestic form with 4 faces turned towards The east, north, west, and south, each face radiated an air of power and benevolence. As if reflecting the god's multifaceted nature, Maheswara explained to Yuma that he had become four-faced due to his intense desire to behold Talatma, the beautiful woman created by Brahman from grains of beauty scattered throughout the universe. Talatma, with her unrivaled beauty and captivating smile, had tempted Maheswara with her charms as she turned in various directions, and a new face of Maheswara would emerge, each one reflecting his boundless love and devotion to her. The god's four faces symbolized his ability to govern the universe from different aspects: sovereignty, east, spiritual connection; north, auspiciousness; west, and destruction. South, Yuma, intrigued by Maheswara's story, asked about his choice of vehicle. A majestic bovine bull, Maheswara revealed that this bull was once a celestial Kunim, Shuravi created by Brahman to yield abundant milk. However, when one of her cows excitedly spat forth onto the god's body, he became enraged and scorched all the kine, causing them to diversify and hew. Brahma, the creator, intervened and gifted Maheswara the bull as a vehicle for bearing him, and the device on his banner. As Yuma continued to ask questions, she inquired about Maheswara's preference for residing in the crematorium over his other heavenly abodes. The god explained that he found solace in this sacred place where ghostly beings, his companions, loved to reside. He believed that the crematorium was a sanctuary adorned with branches of the banyan tree and torn garlands of flowers. Suma's curiosity led her to ask about the duties of the four orders: Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaisya, and Sudra. Maheswara began to explain the sacred responsibilities of each order, emphasizing that those who followed their duties will attain spiritual growth and become one with Brahma. With the Brahmana, the duty was to observe fasts, study the Vedas, and perform rituals. The Kshatriya's duty lay in protecting his people and upholding justice, while the Vaisya was responsible for engaging in trade and commerce. Yuma listened intently. Maheswara continued to elucidate the duties of each order, highlighting the importance of compassion, truthfulness, and self-control.
In the heart of the forest, Yuma, the goddess sought the counsel of Maheswara. The lord of all creatures, she wished to understand the sacred ordinances followed by the forest recluses who dwelled in these serene regions with a concentrated mind and observant spirit. These recluses resided among the springs and fountains of rivers, on hills and mountains, and in woods and forests. Maheswara began to recite the duties of these forest recluses, who were persons that depended solely upon themselves for their protection. They performed ablutions thrice a day, worshipped the Pitras and deities, poured libations on the sacred fire, and practiced the Ishihoma rituals. They lived on fruits, roots, and oil extracted from Inga and castor seeds. Having mastered yoga practices and freed themselves from lust and wrath, they would sit in the Virasana posture, exposing themselves to cold water and fire. These recluses subsisted on water or air or moss, using only 2 stones. For husking their corn, some used their teeth alone. For this purpose they did not possess any utensils, instead relying on rags, tree barks, or deer skins as clothing. Their lives were spent in the woods and forests, where they wandered, lived, and meditated. The forest recluses who followed the scriptures of ascetic success had a different set of practices. Those who roamed freely wore brown robes with shaved heads, while those with wives passed their nights at home. They performed ablutions 3 times a day and practiced Homa rituals using water and fruits from the wilderness. Their duties included absorption, yoga meditation, and adherence to pious acts laid down in the scriptures. Maheswara continued, those who observe these duties will attain rewards. For severe penances, the forest recluses with wives should confine their gratification of senses to their wedded partners, indulging in sexual congress only during their seasons. They must follow the path of righteousness and never pursue objects of desire. From Kaprasu sought further clarification on the duties of ascetics who resided in their respective retreats, possessed wealth of penances, or were kings and princes with great wealth. Maheswara replied that these individuals could succeed in becoming endued with great splendor by following specific acts. For denizens of the forest attaining to an eternal place and adorning themselves with celestial sandal past required them to follow a particular course. Sula's doubts were dispelled as Maheswara continued to explain the path to righteousness. He said that one who made the gift of perfect harmlessness or innocence became endued with righteousness, showing compassion, adopting sincerity towards all creatures, and constituting oneself the soul of all beings, also led to this state. A bath in all the Vedas was equivalent to a behavior of sincerity towards all creatures. In the presence of Yuma, the goddess Lord, Shiva sat with a gentle smile, his eyes gleaming like stars on a clear night. Yuma's curiosity was palpable as she asked him about the mysteries of the four Varnas. Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaisya, and Sudra. She sought to understand how one could fall from their noble birth and become a member of a lower caste. You holy one Yuma, began you who tore off the eyes of Bhaga and the teeth of Pushan, destroyer of Daksha's sacrifice, three-eyed deity. I have a great doubt. How can a Vaisya become a Sudra? Through what acts does a Kshatriya become a Vaisya, and how may a Brahmin fall from their noble birth to become a Kshatriya, or even a Sudra? Shiva's expression turned thoughtful as he began to explain the intricacies of the Varnas. The status of a Brahmin is exceedingly difficult to attain, he said. One becomes a Brahmin through original creation or birth, just like the other three orders. However, if a Brahmin falls away from their duties and follows those assigned for another order, they are no longer considered a Brahmin. His eyes sparkled with understanding as Lord Shiva continued to explain. A Kshatriya who lives like a Brahmin in his next life will become one. Similarly, a Vaisya who follows the practices of a Sudra becomes a Sudra. Even a Brahmin can fall from their noble birth and become a Sudra if they do not observe their duties. As Yuma listened intently, Lord Shiva revealed the consequences of eating forbidden food. If a Brahmin dies with a portion of a Sudra's food remaining in his stomach, he will take birth as a Sudra in his next life. He emphasized that it is essential for a Brahmin to observe their duties and protect their noble status. Lord Shiva then spoke about the importance of good deeds. By performing these acts, a Sudra becomes a Brahmin, and a Vaisya becomes a Kshatriya. A Sudra should serve the three other orders with care and humility, always adhering to the path of righteousness. As Yuma's understanding grew, Lord Shiva revealed the secrets of rising above one's birth. A Vaisya who desires to be a Brahmin in his next life must abstain from meat not slain in sacrifices, observe the duties of peace and tranquility, and become pure in body and mind. He explained that a Vaisya who wishes to be a Kshatriya should also follow these principles. Whose eyes shone with gratitude as Lord Shiva concluded his explanation. One who observes their duties, follows the ordinances, and serves others selflessly will rise above their birth. They will take birth in a noble family. In the sacred presence of Lord Maheswara, Yuma, the goddess of prosperity and beauty, approached with reverence and curiosity. Her eyes sparkled with a desire for knowledge as she asked the Divine One, O Holy One, O Lord of all beings, O thou that art worshipped by the deities and Asuras equally, tell me what are the duties and derelictions of men. Lord Maheswara smiled benevolently, his eyes shining with compassion. He began to speak in a voice that was both gentle and majestic. O Goddess, thou art well conversant with the true import of duties. Thou art ever devoted to righteousness and self-restraint. The question thou hast asked me is fraught with the benefit of all creatures. She paused for a moment, collecting his thoughts before continuing. Those persons that are devoted to the religion of truth, that are righteous and destitute of the indications of the several modes of life, and that enjoy the wealth earned by righteous means, succeed in ascending to heaven. Those men who are freed from all doubts, that are possessed of omniscience, and that have eyes to behold all things, are never enchained by either virtue or sinus. Yuma listened intently. Lord Maheswara continued to reveal the secrets of the divine path. Those men that are freed from all attachments can never be bound by the chains of action. They who never injure others in thought, word, or deed, and who never attach themselves to anything, can never be bound by acts. She spoke of those who abstained from taking the lives of any creature, who were pious in conduct, who had compassion, who regarded friends and foes in an equal light, and who were self-restrained. They can never be bound by acts. He declared. Yuma asked about words that could either bind or free one from their bonds. Lord Mahaswara replied, "Those men who never tell lies, for either themselves or others, or in jest or for exciting laughter, succeed in ascending to heaven." He spoke of the importance of speaking smooth and sweet words, welcoming all whom they meet with sincerity, and avoiding harsh speeches that could cause breach of understanding between friends. They who always speak what is true and what promotes good feelings succeed in ascending to heaven. He said this Yulo. Listen with rapt attention. Lord Mahaswara revealed the secrets of mental acts or thoughts that could either bind or free one from their bonds. He spoke of those men who did not seek even mentally to take what belonged to others, even when they saw it lying in a lonely forest. They who do not bear ill will to any creature, that do not stand in need of labor for their subsistence, that bear friendly hearts towards all beings, and that entertain compassion towards all, succeed in ascending to heaven. He declared. Finally, Yuma asked about the acts that could lead to a.
In a tranquil forest glade, Yuma, the goddess inquired of Mahaswara about the path to attaining heaven. She asked, by what disposition, what conduct, what acts, and what gifts does a man succeed in attaining to heaven? Mahaswara's eyes sparkled as he began to recount the tale of one who had walked this sacred path. He spoke of a person with a liberal heart who honored Brahmanas and treated them with hospitality. This noble soul made gifts of food, drink, robes, and other articles of enjoyment to those in need, the destitute, the blind, and the distressed. As Mahaswara's words wove a tapestry of virtue, he described how this individual constructed shelters for travelers, dug wells, and excavated tanks. He made arrangements for the free distribution of gifts. Every day gave generously to all seekers, and offered seats, beds, conveniences, wealth, jewels, gems, houses, corn, kind fields, and women. Mahaswara's voice dripped with reverence as he spoke of this selfless being who resided in heaven for a long period, enjoying diverse kinds of superior articles. He sported in the woods of Nandana and other delightful regions, surrounded by apsaras, celestial nymphs who danced and sang in his honor. However, Mahaswara's tone shifted to one of sorrow as he spoke of those who failed to follow this path. He described individuals with small understandings who were incapable of making gifts. Even when solicited by Brahmanas and possessed of abundant wealth, these men, consumed by cupidity and arrogance, turned away from the destitute, blind, and distressed. As Mahaswara continued his tale, he painted a vivid picture of those who humiliated their preceptors and seniors, insulting them without showing reverence and humility. Such individuals sank into hell only to be reborn in low and wretched families. The Swapakas and Pukases, who were exceedingly vile and bereft of intelligence, yet Mahaswara's words also spoke of those who walked the path of righteousness. Individuals who were not arrogant or filled with pride. These compassionate souls worshipped deities and Brahmanas, enjoyed the respect of the world, bowed to everyone that deserved their reverence, and uttered smooth and sweet words. Mahaswara described these righteous ones as being devoted to the good of all beings, never feeling aversion for anybody, and always giving way to those who deserved it. They adored their preceptors in the manner in which preceptors deserve to be adored, welcomed all creatures with proper courtesy, and lived worshipping seniors and guests with honors they deserved. As Mahaswara's tale unfolded, he spoke of one who was fierce in conduct, inspiring terror in all creatures, and injuring other beings with hands or feet. This individual sang.
In the realm of the divine, a profound conversation unfolded between Mahadeva, the powerful Shiva, and his beloved wife Hua. The scene was set on Mount Kailash, where the majestic couple resided amidst the serene beauty of nature. They sat together, surrounded by the gentle rustle of leaves and the soft chirping of birds. Narada, the celestial sage, appeared before them with a twinkle in his eyes. He spoke to Mahadeva, saying, "The person Mahadeva himself has become desirous of hearing rather than talking," and with that view he questioned his dear spouse, who was seated by his side. Mahadeva's eyes locked onto Yuva's radiant form, and with a gentle smile he began to speak. "Thou, O goddess, art conversant with what is supreme and what is not. Thou art acquainted with all duties, O thou that lovest to reside in the retreats of ascetics. I desire to ask thee about something I wish that has passed by me. The woke discoursed to me on the topic. His face glowed with a soft light as she listened to her husband's words. She knew that he was seeking her wisdom and insight into the duties of women. With a gentle nod, she began to speak. O Holy One, O Lord of all created things, O source of all that is past, present, and future, it is through thee grace that the words I am uttering are taking their rise in my mind. Yua's voice was like music as she continued, all these rivers that are of my sex, O God of gods, endued with the waters of all the Tirthas, are approaching thee presence for enabling thee to perform the ablutions in them. As Yua spoke, the celestial river Gaina rose from her sea accompanied by the other rivers. They were all conversant with the duties of women, and had come to honor Yua's request. The goddess Gaina, who was revered as the foremost river of all rivers, stepped forward to answer Mahadev's question of goddess. Thou art always devoted to the due performance of all duties. Thou hast favored me highly by thus questioning me, O Celeste One. Thou art honored by the entire universe. Yet thou asketh that am but a river. Gaina's words were like a gentle breeze as she continued, that person who, though himself competent to discourse on a topic, yet asks another, or who pays a graceful tribute to another, certainly deserves